Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel, and welcome back to another reading vlog. This is going to be part 2 of my Reindeer Readathon reading for this year, and I felt like part 1 went really well. I managed to complete 4 books, which covered 4 of the main prompts and 2 of the bonus prompts, and I brought the overall number of pages I need to read every day to complete my entire stack down from 112 to about 90, so I'm feeling really good about that progress, and I'm also feeling very motivated going into this part 2 because I really enjoyed basically everything that I read in part 1, so I'm hopeful that good energy will continue on into part 2. So I figured before we dive into the reading for this vlog, we could briefly touch on what I read for the first one in case you're interested in checking out that part 1 vlog and seeing my thoughts on any of these books. So, part 1. I managed to finish The Golden Raven by Nora Sakavic for Dasher, Murder at the Black Cat Cafe by Seishio Komizo for Cupid, Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie for Blitzen and for the Christmas Star bonus prompt, and then Backdraft by Cole McCade for Rudolph and the Christmas Lights bonus prompt. So all of my thoughts in depth will be in that first part, in case you want to check that out. Going into this part 2, I have 5 books left on my TBR, not including anything I might read for Slay in it if I manage to finish everything else, and this is what's left. We have Empress of Forever by Max Gladstone, which I'm planning to read for Dancer. This was a word search prompt where I needed to, find the first 5 words or phrases that I saw and then find a book that connected with one of them. So one of my phrases was time travel, and this one has somebody who gets flung into the far future and has to fight like a terrifying galactic empress. Sounds very fun. Then we have for Prancer, which is a title with at least 7 syllables, we have The Legacy of Arniston House by T.L. Huchu, which I'm also using for the Christmas Carols bonus prompt, which is to listen to an audiobook. I've been really enjoying this series on audio. The narrator is fantastic, and I'm excited about that because I often struggle with audiobooks, but I've had no problem with these whatsoever, and they're just a really fun series to listen to. Then we have for Vixen, which is an author that has an initial in their name, we have Snake Eater by T. Kingfisher. This is probably going to be the first thing I read in this video, if I'm honest, because I've been really anticipating this. It came out right at the start of December, and it arrived a few days ago, and I love T. Kingfisher's writing, and I love her horror in particular, which is what this is, so I'm excited to dive into it. It's about, an angry god in the Arizona desert, and that sounds like a good time to me. Then moving on, we have for Comet, which was based on your astrology sign. You had a set of colors. You needed to find a book that had one of those colors as the main color on the cover. And I had gray, blue, and turquoise, and I ended up with Firebreak by Nicole Cornerstace because it has multiple different shades of turquoise on the color on the cover. And this one is also from my self-destructing books list for the year, so it'd be good to make a little bit of progress on that. And finally, if I don't knock this entire stack of books over with my bad wrist... Oh, no. It's fine, I saved it. Finally, we have Henry V by Dan Jones, which I'm reading for Donner, a book with something in the title on the cover. So Henry V is also in this little portrait in the V in the middle there. So, this is the only nonfiction I'm planning to read this month, but I've been wanting to get more into nonfiction. That was one of my goals for this year that I haven't really accomplished, and I've also just been intrigued by reading more history because I haven't really read a lot of history, and it felt like this would be a good place to start because Dan Jones, from what I've heard, seems quite approachable as a historian, and I know this has sort of a present tense style, which should make it really interesting, and I'm excited to dive into it. So, that is what I'm going to be reading for this part 2, some combination of those. I don't know exactly which ones yet, and I don't know if I'll read all 5 in this, or if I'll end up breaking it up. I think it'll just depend a little bit on how many thoughts I end up having on what I end up reading, but we're just gonna kind of go and see what happens. Like I said, I think I'm gonna read Snake Eater first, just because I've been highly anticipating that one, and I know, being that it's a T. Kingfisher, that I'm gonna read it really quickly, and I think that'll be a really fun way to start off this part 2 vlog. Alright, I have finished a little bit later than I originally planned, but I finished Snake Eater by T. Kingfisher. I meant to finish this one yesterday, and then my brain was just set to no, and I ended up reading only 60 pages instead of the 140 I needed to finish it. But I have now finished Snake Eater, and I loved this. I think I'm giving it 4.5 stars, only because... one, I think the marketing information gives a little bit too much away of what's going to happen, and kind of what the horror element at play is here, so I felt like when it took a really long time to get to that point, and I would have enjoyed this better if I had not had that prior context. I would have enjoyed the build up a little bit more. And two, there's a really interesting parallel connected to one of the book's themes between its titular Snake Eater character and the main character's former partner Walter, who is really, he's not like present in the story, but he's like present through Selena and the way that she has like formed her world around his opinions. And so I feel like there's a really interesting parallel and theme that emerges between those two characters that I wanted it to dig into just a little bit more. It kind of sets it up, but it never really acknowledges it or looks at it in any real way. And I wanted it to dig a little more into that idea, because I think that Selena needed to like make that connection for herself. So I think if that had happened, the ending of this would have hit just a little bit harder. But as it is, I really loved this. I love Selena, who is our main character, who is like traveled into the desert looking for her aunt, only to discover that her aunt has died, and she ends up staying in her aunt's old house in this small desert town, and she's trying to like adjust to life in Quartz Creek and trying to like figure out how she fits into the social structure of the town. And I really enjoyed that part of it. I loved the friends that she makes, particularly Father Aguirre and Grandma Billy. They're my favorite characters. They're so good. They're so funny and yet like so supportive and kind to Selena in ways that she's not expecting. So I've just really enjoyed all of that. I liked the broader cast as well, and I liked a lot of what this was digging into. It's very much a book about like abusive relationships, which I think is interesting, the way that it's tackling it, because it's not just looking at romantic relationships, it's also looking at some other kinds of relationships, and I also felt like it could have dug into that just a little bit more. But on the whole, I thought it was really interesting, and I had a great time reading this, and it made me laugh, it made me cry, it made me grin like an idiot. So, you know, all in all, a really good time, and definitely worth the 4.5 stars I'm giving it. So that's where we're at for that one, and since I was a little bit behind yesterday, I think I'm going to go ahead and start my next book now, and I'm going to go ahead and start Henry V. I think I'm going to go here next because this is the densest book I have left. It's not the longest. The longest book I have left is the Max Gladstone book, but this, I think, is going to be the most information-rich and dense, so I need to give myself time to process it and to actually read it. I suspect these are going to be slightly harder 100 pages than I had with my last couple of books, so, by which I mean 100 pages a day. I realized that sounded weird the way I phrased that. Anyway, I think I'm going to need a little extra time to dig into this one, and I want to make sure I'm getting to it kind of earlier in the month, because it's currently the 13th, so we're not quite halfway through December. I'm making really good progress, and I just want to give myself plenty of time to finish this one. So that's what we're going to do next, and I'm going to go get started, but first I'm going to take my dog for a walk and do some laundry that I've been putting off for, like, weeks. Hooray. I've done it. I finished Henry V, and I did it last night while listening to the audiobook, which surprised me. I really enjoyed the audiobook. I often struggle with them, but I found that this audiobook, which is narrated actually by the author, was just really clear and easy to follow. He has a very pleasant cadence to his voice, so it was really easy to kind of stay engaged with what he was saying, and it made the reading experience, alongside the fact that the book is written with present tense verbs, it made it feel like somebody telling a story about this piece of history. Like, it almost makes it feel like an oral history instead of like a written book, which I found really compelling, and I just like tore through this thing. It was really interesting. I really enjoyed the trajectory of the story, because this isn't necessarily interested in giving you lots of like little bits and details to memorize as much as it is interested in showing you the trajectory of Henry's life. So it's a biography that's looking at the entirety of his life from the day he's born to the day he dies. I would say in the first half is mostly focused on the ages between like 12 to 13 to about 26, which would have been when his father became king and then when he became king. It's interested in the experiences he had as a young man that prepared him to become king, the experiences where he learned how to like run a military and how to fund a military, how to garner support for his campaigns, and then there was also some bits about how he learned how to like do political theater, basically. How did he learn how to perform the role of king? And then there's also a lot of focus on his experiences governing. He was involved with a council that ran the government for a little while his father, Henry IV, was too ill to govern, and he learned a lot about like financial administration and politics, and there's just like a lot of rich detail here, but it's all organized around this kind of general trajectory of Henry's life as he's learning how to be a king. And then in the second half, how we see that education playing out in his actions as king. So I just thought this was really compelling. I really like that there's a lot of moments where Dan Jones acknowledges that we really can't know a lot of what Henry thought or felt because we just don't have anything in the historical record that tells us that. He's not someone who kept a diary as far as we're aware, so we don't have a whole lot of his own direct words on things. We have like reports of what he has said, and we have little bits and pieces from like letters that he wrote. So we can't really know exactly what he thought or felt or, you know, what his aims were at all times. But we can see from the actions that he took, you know, a bit of that learning that he had as a young man for all of these different aspects of the role of king, because we see him using those lessons that he learned. He's changing his tactics in the later part of his life as he is ruling to adjust to, like, his previous failures. So I found that a really interesting focus. I just really enjoyed reading this. I think my two favorite chapters are in the first half of the book. There's a section called Holy Fire that's about some of the early instances where Henry is proves to be quite adept with political theater and kind of putting on a display that allows him to, like, establish his opinion on something, but also, like, carefully balance between multiple viewpoints. So I thought that was really interesting. That particular section's about a heretic that's being burned at the stake, and Henry's kind of words to that guy and his actions during that execution that, like, firmly established him as a supporter of the English church, but also showed that he could, like, show mercy and that he's, like, a reasonable ruler and a just ruler. So I found that section really interesting. And then also there's a section in the first half called Ballads and Brawls that's about Henry's love of literature and some books that were gifted to him or written to him that were like advice as he was preparing to become king. It was a point where Henry IV was quite ill and it looked like he was going to pass away. So various people were, like, giving Prince Henry advice because they were anticipating that he was, like, imminently going to become Henry V. And so I really liked that section, both in terms of its discussion of the content of those books, but also its discussion of books as art objects and Henry's love of books and literature, and also it talks a little bit about, like, his love of music as well. So I think at the end of this book, Dan Jones talks about having tried to create a really well-rounded portrait of Henry in here, and I think he's done a really good job of that. I feel like it's a really effective biography, and I was completely gripped all the way through. I could not put this down. I was really interested to find out more about Henry, and also to find out more about the political and social and economic situation of England at the time, because I knew a little bit about it, but not a lot. So yeah, I would thoroughly recommend this, 100%, and I really want to pick up some other books by Dan Jones. I have one other one on my shelf called, I think, The Crusades or The Crusaders or something, that's about the Crusades, as it were. That one, I know a little bit about the Crusades from a paper that I wrote several years ago, but another topic that I would love to learn more about. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed this, had a great time with it, more so than I expected. I don't think I have anything else to say about it, so I'm going to set it down now before I get too rambly and too repetitive here in my thoughts on it. But now I get to move on to my other audiobook, because I do still have a little bit of weaving to finish. I did a lot of weaving while listening to this book yesterday. I finished one towel. I'm making a set of 2 kitchen towels, but I finished one towel, and then started the next one and figured, okay, I'll do like a couple of inches of that. Anyway, the second towel was almost complete, and it was very late when I stopped listening and stopped weaving. So, as I'm finishing up that last little chunk of the second towel, I'm going to be starting The Legacy of Arniston House by T.L. Huchu. Sorry for the weird angle. I picked that up in a weird way. But I am planning to start this today. I need to stop putting it off, which I'm doing because I know it's going to make me sad. I already know about something that happens in here that it's going to rip my heart out. But I need to rip the Band-Aid off and get through it so that I can read this one. And then the final book actually came out earlier this month. So that's kind of sad because I love this series. So I'm kind of sad that it's ending, but at the same time excited to see how it's all going to play out. And first step to getting to that is I need to read this one. Oh, also I redid the math, and I've gone from, it was like 95 pages a day that I needed to read, or 90 or something, to finish all the books in my stack, and now I'm down to 85. And that was from a starting point of 112. So I feel like I'm making some excellent progress. I still have like half the month left, and I'm nearly done with my TBR. So I'm feeling very successful. But we'll see how things go, because I'm also about to be traveling soon. I've just finished listening to the audiobook for The Legacy of Arniston House. That ending is devastating. There was a thing I knew was going to happen in this book that I thought would be the thing that would make me the most sad, but the end of this is definitely worse. And I don't mean like poorly written. I mean like it just emotionally very hard. It takes a very different turn. I think it leaves off at a really interesting point, because I don't know what's going to come in the last book. There is one more book in the series, but we have a really dramatic change in how things are going at the end of this book. And overall, I really enjoyed this. I've been really loving the series, and my experience with this was no different. I do think this is my least favorite so far, but mostly because it feels like a good chunk of the middle of the book is filler. Each of the previous books has had a, like, clear central mystery, and this one doesn't really have that, so it feels more like Europa's just kind of ping-ponging between different events. Like, something happens, she flees. Something happens, she flees. Something happens, she flees. And I found that a little bit repetitive. There was also some repetition in some of Ropa's own internal thoughts, and not in a way that, like, I thought added something. There is a repetition I like in here, because one of the things that this book is exploring is grief. And so one of the things I really liked about this was the way that Ropa, it kind of in the moment, instead of having like a big dramatic moment at the death, and then her just kind of thinking about it later, she kind of, like with adrenaline, is like, I've got to figure out what to do now, and doesn't really process the death initially, but then has these like waves of grief crash over her later on. And personally, that's my experience with grief, is that, like, you might be sad in the moment, but then, like, it's this, like, ongoing thing where you think you're fine, and then suddenly you're, like, doubled over crying. And I found that to be really compelling and really relatable representation of grief. That was a big chunk of this book. I really liked that part of it. So that was the one repetition I liked, but there were a couple of ideas that she had that she kept repeating in her mind, particularly on her opinions on other mages, all of the different magicians. She kept having this like repetitive, like, but magicians only care about their own skin. But magicians only care about their own skin. But magicians only care about their own skin. They don't want to help anybody. They just care about themselves. And that kind of kept coming up throughout in a way that I found a little distracting. So yeah, middle part is a little repetitive and a little bit filler-y. But I think we also get some really big reveals. We get some really big pieces of information that start to tie all of the different mysteries from across the different books together. I think we get some really good twists in this one. And there's some really effective horror in here as well. So I think there's a lot of really great content in this book. It just feels a little bit more fillery than the previous books. And I think it's that lack of a central investigation for Ropa to be following. It feels a little less like she has like a purpose throughout this book, other than just, like, she has a purpose, but she's not really, it's not as directed. It's just more nebulous, like, I want revenge, I want to find these people and make them pay, but, like, there's not a clear, like, okay, this thing happened and I need to go find out X, Y, and Z pieces of information so that I can solve the mystery or find the item or whatever. Not my favorite overall, but I'm still loving the series, and I am excited to get to the 5th book in the series, which is the last one, I believe, and that just came out earlier this month, so I should be able to get a hold of it and read it soon. So that is that, and that is my 7th book done. That's so many more books. Whoopsie. I hope that didn't make a horrible noise, but if it did, I'm sorry. That's so many more books than I anticipated reading this month. I'm really excited at the progress I've made. So now we're down to, I think they're behind me here. I've got Empress of Forever and Firebreak left. I think I'm going to read Firebreak next, because I remember the writing being really fast-paced. I did a try-a-chapter a while back, so I'm going to restart it. And I remember the writing being fairly fast-paced, so I think I can get through this one fairly quickly. And then that will leave me with the longer Empress of Forever for our travels for the holidays. That said, I do need to take a little bit of a break over the next day, because I'm trying to finish a different book. I have a book I'm reading for my work book club, which is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So unfortunately that doesn't count for this readathon, because I started it prior to December. I do need to finish it because book club is on Monday, and it's Saturday evening, and I've got 230 pages left. So I need to finish it up so that I can join book club on Monday. So upon reflection, I had a couple of additional thoughts about the Legacy of Arneson House that I wanted to briefly mention, just because they're things that have kind of stuck in my mind. The first of which is that there's a relationship that gets set up in the first part of the book, and I think this is one of the things that really brought my rating down from 5 stars to 4, besides the repetition in the middle and the fillery feeling, was that there's a relationship in the start of the book that feels really significant. It feels like we're going to get a lot of development for that throughout the book, and then it just kind of doesn't happen. And all of the revelations that Ropa has about that character are based on like these very small interactions with him later on in the book. And it just felt like we got something set up that didn't get fulfilled in a satisfying way. I really wanted more of that relationship. I wanted to learn more about that character and his motivations, why he was doing what he was doing. So I was a little frustrated with that piece of it. And then the other thing was that I realized that the ending of book 4 feels a lot like it mirrors in some ways the ending of book 3, which I think made some of the emotional impact I should have had at the end of the book a little bit blunted, just because it was like, okay, we've been here before. But obviously it can't end the same way that it did in book 3, so you kind of have a sense of where things are going, and I think I wanted a little more, like, emotional impact. It did still make me tear up. I think it was really good, but it didn't make me sob in quite the same way as the ending of book 3 did. So, yeah, I think it was just it felt a little bit flat overall in comparison with the other books, which have just been fantastic. Like, I think I've given almost every book in the series 5 stars up to this point. So it's really just, like, it's a really high bar that T.L. Huchu has set for this series, and it's hard to maintain that momentum throughout. So this book just felt a little bit middle book syndrome-y, but I'm hopeful that the final book in the series is really going to wrap everything up in a satisfying way. So those are the thoughts that kind of popped to mind later that I wanted to make sure that I said. But I think with that, I'm actually going to end this vlog here. And I don't know that I'm going to do any more vlogging for Reindeer Readathon. I am still reading 2 more books, and I'll talk about that in my wrap-up for the month if I manage to finish them. But the next little while is going to be very hectic with lots of travel and lots of family time. And I know that the people that I'm going to be visiting with aren't going to necessarily want to be in my videos, and I don't want to be so focused on making a vlog that I'm not spending that time with them. So I'm going to end this one here. I feel like we finished 3 books, and there were 3 books that I generally enjoyed. I loved both Snake Eater and Henry V, and I still had a really good time with Legacy of Arneson House, regardless of my criticisms of it. I still had a really enjoyable experience reading it. It's just a really well-crafted world and a really interesting main character. So, like, I had some great reads in this vlog, and I feel like I'm happy to end it here. So let me know down in the comments below how your reading for December is going at this point in time, and I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, I hope you consider giving it a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting at least once a week, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!